Welcome to the Dental Implant Practices podcast, where each episode will explore how to integrate dental implants into your practice and into bone, with your host, Dr. Philip Gordon.
Hey guys, this is Philip Gordon. Thanks for listening to the Dental Implant Practices podcast. Today you're going to hear a replay of a online CE event that I gave last Friday, April 17th for the Milwaukee Implant Institute with Frank Caputo. Dr. Frank Caputo. It was a fundraiser that we gave for COVID-19, and this is a recording of my lecture. Obviously, you can't see the slides, but I still think there's some good content, so I thought I'd share it here. Thanks for listening to the show, and hope you enjoy the podcast. First of all, I just want to say thanks to Frank for putting this on. I've put on lots of events, small and or large, and I know they're a ton of work, so I appreciate him doing that. I also appreciate being invited to do this. I am honored to be on with such a great set of people here, most of which I'm good friends with, but respect all of the people that have gone before me and Dr. Minichetti as well, and Silverman and Frank. It's been great. I'm a general dentist, consider myself an implant dentist, and that's kind of what I focus on, and it's what I love to do. It's where my passion is, and so kind of that's what leads me to kind of go on these journeys and crazy adventures that we've been on. I want to just say thanks to my wonderful wife, who's very tolerant of me kind of running around the country chasing implants and CE and doing things. And then my wonderful kids that I've gotten to spend a lot more time with during the lockdown. It's been great to hang out with them. And thanks for everybody listening to me here today. I do host a podcast, Dental Implant Practices Podcast, and that's where I just kind of I interview people about implants. And I also do some minor consulting or training with individuals if they need. So, like I said, thanks to Frank for putting this on. We took this at the last AAID meeting together. Great organization with the AAID. I encourage everybody to get involved if they're not. And I want to have an invitation if anybody ever wants to come see me in Kansas City, see what I'm doing, come check me out. There's lots to do here. Fall's a good time if the Chiefs are playing and barbecue's smoking. So anybody can reach out to me anytime. So, with these kind of things, everybody always wants a magic answer, right? What's the magic answer? What's the one or two bullet points? Unfortunately, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to give you that today, but I am going to open your eyes to some things, and hopefully I'm going to give you, I'm going to tell you how to put a process in place that will succeed if you're willing to put in the time and energy. And all this stuff is a process. You have to plug in these protocols as you go. All the things Dr. Minichetti was just showing, you have to get those fundamentals down before you can start with the advanced cases. The same thing with the lab side of it too, and or the prosthetics. You start with small restorations, onesie, twosie cases, and work up the full arch. But I'm going to show you how to put the whole thing together, so you at least know where to start and know what other people are doing. So I think ultimately what kind of led me to kind of drive a look into this laboratory production side. I had to ask myself some of these questions. How much are you spending on implants, parts, and lab fees for your practice? And I think the more you get into implant dentistry, the more you realize there's some considerable fees that go with these. It's great when you can say, well, I charge X amount per crown or implant or full arch restoration. But what does that mean on your overhead, right? So if you're charging $25,000 an arch, but your fees are $20,000 an arch, and you have 10 visits, you're not really making a lot of money. So you always got to keep your eye on costs associated. And then what are the results and profits, like we talked about? Are you happy with the results you're getting? Are you happy with the profits you're getting? If not, why not? And what can you do to take control over that? And I think that's what everybody wants is some level of control and or predictability. So I have here some kind of thoughts that I wrote down, and it was why would a dentist want to bring all lab capabilities into their office for in-house production? And I think, some people have thought, when I started doing this, like, Phil, you're crazy. Why would I even want to do this, right? And I think some of the things that I came up with that were important to me were, one of them was cost. Obviously, that wasn't the biggest driver, but you might be able to save a considerable amount of money once you get these processes started. I think it's just like anything else. There's obviously an initial investment, but obviously the return on investment is what we're looking for. So are we able to get our costs down? Time is a big thing, right? Time is money is what people say. So time and costs go together. But it's also about, you also might be able to reduce your turnaround time. So time might also mean time frame from start to finish, right? So, a lot of these bigger cases we're doing takes 4, 5, 6, 8 months for implants or surgical phase. I don't want the restorative phase to take just as long, because then we're talking about a year to 2 years to 3 years on some of these treatment when people really want their teeth, right? So turnaround times with labs was a big issue for me. Customize, right? So everybody wants customized things these days. I don't think anybody wants, teeth off a shelf. Obviously, they have these dentures, denture setups. You can take teeth and plug them in people's mouth, but I don't think anybody wants that, right? We want to customize our work, make it a craft, make it look good. So how can you do custom staining and glazing, custom artistry, custom work to really get your craft, to the highest level? Obviously, number 4 is communication. That was a big one with me. Even if you work with a good lab, the communication is still, I'm going to put something in a box, send it to you, send you some emails, and you have to reconstruct this idea of what's going on. When I have my lab tech in my office, I just say, come around, meet the patient, see what's going on with their mouth. They see what I see. And so the communication between you and the lab is far improved when you're working under the same roof. So I think communication can be a big one. And patients can tell the lab tech exactly what they're wanting at the same time they're telling the dentist. And so everyone's on the same page about what the expectations are. And I think that's when we get into trouble with some of these cases, if we don't understand what the expectations are and then we fail to deliver on those expectations. That's when things get sideways. So I think communication has been one of the biggest perks that I've found through this whole process. There's nothing that we can't figure out with the doctor, the lab tech, and the patient in the chair, right? And so we're not leaving any questions left unturned. And then quality, you can maybe get a better quality back when your lab is in house, when your technician is seeing in the mouth and knows what to create on those effects, as opposed to just working off static models or digital impressions. So I think when the lab techs get involved with the patient care, they have I don't know if this is true or not, but I would think they might put more of themselves into their work because they're seeing the patient the work's going in, right? I can imagine if I'm working on a stone model, or if I'm working and I've seen this patient's face and I understand their desires and expectations. We've had these talks and you've met them face to face, and the lab tech's there on the delivery. They want to make sure they're putting their best effort to it, and just as us dentists are. So I think these are all big things to think about when deciding why would somebody want to bring a lab in house, and these were the big things for me. So let's see here. So where do you start building a lab in your office? What are the key parts you got to get in order? I think the first thing for me was I had to find the right lab tech. I had to understand, okay, I'm a busy practice. I'm a busy dentist. I'm not going to do this myself. I want to bring someone in to do this. Much like maybe finding an associate or a spouse or a business partner. I think finding the right lab tech maybe is the first step that I took. And then once I found the right lab tech, then I pulled the trigger on moving forward with the rest of it. I didn't go buy the equipment and then hope to find, build it and they will come technique. I found the right lab tech and then built the stuff around him. You need to get the right equipment, right? Obviously, that's quite a bit different than it was 10 years ago even. So I'm not talking about making PFM crowns and old school techniques where we're doing gold castings and things like that. Today it's about digital, it's about milling, it's about printing. So getting the right equipment is huge, and things that can talk and play to each other nicely, right? So there's open communication between DICOMs and STLs and all those things. So get the right supplies. Obviously, even if you have the right machines, you got to know what pucks and what things to feed into them and what materials to use. So that's a big thing. And then you have to develop systems. Obviously, this is another big branch of your office you're bringing in. You're going to have to kind of co-develop systems between you, your lab tech, your staff, because now, as opposed to putting things in a box and shipping off and forgetting about it until it comes back, you have to develop those internal processes of, okay, we're going to have this ready when the patient comes back. How does this go from my operatory to the lab back to the operatory in a way that makes sense for everybody? So I think those are things to think about. I've got this one here that says, teamwork makes the dream work. This is my lab tech, Ryan. He looks like he's really tough. He's really, a big teddy bear. He's the nicest guy ever. But he is a magician at what he does. I can't do a fraction of what he does. I hope he can't do what I do, or otherwise I might not be needed anymore. But, he is a pro in his realm. I'm a pro in my realm. And we come together in this synergistic effect, right? We teach each other nuances about the front and back end that maybe we didn't have the opportunity to learn from each other before. But we had been working together with immediate conversions in my office for years, and he had been doing lab work for me at another lab. And that was just something where we decided to kind of take the relationship to the next step. I've been to a lot of labs. I love Glidewell. I'm not going to pretend that I'm ever going to become Glidewell Lab. That's too much. But I want to become Gordon Lab, right? So what does that mean? For me, it was just, hey, I'm spending X amount on lab. I'm using these different parameters. I'm disappointed and each one has various limitations. How can I, create the ideal situation for me and my patients? And that's kind of where all this started. So I decided, investing back in my own company. Well, if I'm going to spend money, if I'm going to spend $200,000-$300,000 on lab work each year, I might as well be investing that in my own processes as opposed to just giving that money away and saying, okay, that's just the cost of doing business, right? So don't spend off your cash, put it back into the company. For me, that's always been better training, better systems, better staff, and better products. And ultimately, I assume if I do things right and keep an eye on the numbers, then that may mean better profit for me. It may just mean a better experience, and that's okay too. So where do you get equipment and what to get for your needs, right? So with highly advanced digital solutions and dental materials these days, these processes can be streamlined and predictable. I think I'm kind of early on the adopter curve with certain things. I'm not like a neophyte on the adoption curve, but I'm not a laggard either. So I kind of wanted to make sure that the technology was there, the materials were there, and the cost was there. And I think right now we're at that time, whether it's digital impressions, whether it's in-house milling, whether it's in-house 3D printing. I think we're finally at a point where the technology's there, the materials have caught up, and then also the price point is attainable for these sort of things. So I think it was kind of waiting for some of that to kind of catch up. So this is obviously full upper and lower zirconia case. I don't think this case could look like this 10 years ago with full arch zirconia. Obviously I came into dentistry in 2009 when the digital era was still kind of in its early infancy. Now, 11 years later in 2020, we're in full swing. But what people forget is the materials have come a long way too. So, Dr. Minichetti probably remembers, 10 years ago, we weren't putting in full arch zirconia because they didn't look good. It was probably hybrids and acrylics over bars. But the problems with that is you'd have, teeth pop off, staining, chipping. Nowadays with the zirconia, we don't get the staining and chipping. We have the predictability. But finally, the strength and aesthetics have caught up in a way where it's not a limiting factor, whereas aesthetics were before. So I'm a strong believer in zirconia now, whereas even 5 years ago, it wasn't my go-to choice. So where to go for all your 3D milling, printing equipment? I chose a company called Articon, which is out of California. I don't get anything from them. I don't really plug for them much, but I like to share good experiences when I have them. And so this was a good company for me. They got kind of a total in-house package, right? So what did that mean for me? I said, hey, Ryan, we need to supply our lab. What do we need to do that? So for me, it means we need a mill, right? And if you're experienced with milling at all, there's wet mills, there's dry mills, or there's wet and dry. I wanted one that was wet and dry, which basically means zirconia you mill dry, but Emax you mill wet. PMMA you mill dry, but titanium you mill wet. So just kind of different kinds of mills they have out there, and then also different capabilities. Like we wanted a 5-axis mill, which just basically means it can kind of move around and do all kinds of things, whereas maybe a 3-axis mill might just be kind of more limited, more like a CIRAC, right? So we needed a mill, we needed a printer, we needed a 3D printer for models, and other things that we didn't even know about yet. We needed a desktop scanner, which is kind of like what labs use. You can put a whole articulator on there and scan it. I needed an intraoral scanner for operatory, and I wanted them to be the same MEDIT so they could talk and share communication. We needed a design software. Once we had all the information, we could drag it over to ExoCAD and do the designing. I have another printer, Forum Labs, that I have picked up. It's an older one. And then once you mill something, whether it be Emax or zirconia, but we're mostly doing 98% zirconia. Once you mill it, then you have to sinter it. And zirconia is different because it has to go through a sintering cycle, which takes it in this raw, almost like powder form. It's like a hard powder, but it's dusty. And then it's 25% larger. You sinter it almost for 12 to 18 hours, and it shrinks it down 25%, and it turns strong. But then you have to hit it with staining glaze and throw it through a staining glaze oven. So that was kind of our list. And, fortunately, Articon was able to offer all that under one solution. So for me, it was the IMSCOR Cortitech 350i because it's a wet and dry mill. It's a 5-axis. It's a pretty big machine. So it's you look at these pictures and think, that just sit on your counter. I mean, it's probably 3.5 feet by 4 feet tall and probably weighs 400 pounds. It's a big lug, and it needs its own air supply. So you have to get a dedicated compressor. But it's an amazing machine. It's a workhorse, and it should do everything you need. I got the Asiga Max 3D printer, which is actually kind of one of the higher end ones. I didn't realize that at the time, but it's actually high end, which is good because it can print very fine detail. Because we are still printing models with dies so that we can do things old school and kind of articulate them, right? We're not going modelless. We're still printing models and dies, but you can ditch them and scale them and all that on the printer so it can print them in different ways. So we're using the printer for our models. This is the desktop scanner. Like I said, you can take off arches. You can take off anything you do. You can take PBS impressions and digitize them. So this is just a way to digitize anything in the office to an STL. You could still take PVS and put it on the scanner and scan it, but that's obviously not what we're doing. So I got the Meta intraoral scanner. So this is what I have. Intraoral, I'm using this in the mouth. Obviously, I think most people have heard of that nowadays. It's kind of bang for your buck. I think it's the best scanner out there for the least quality or the least cost. I think it's about $19,000 all in. So the exocad design software is kind of what we design teeth on, right? So it's kind of like virtually waxing teeth. The lab tech's doing all this. I'm not doing any of it. I basically am communicating to him saying, here's what I see, here's what I want to do. He works it up on this. We look at the final thing. We kind of go through the nuances of the teeth and the shape and all that. And then, but he's controlling that, and I'm just there to kind of give my input. But finding somebody who is really good at exocad obviously is the important thing, because I think you could spend, it's like becoming a computer programmer. I think you could spend, months learning this and still not know what you're doing. So finding someone who has experience in this and or knows what to do with this is a big deal. I think 3Shape's the other big one out there. So, and then we got the Foreign Labs printer too. We use this kind of as a backup and to print opposing models and things that aren't as high detail because it's a little bit older one. Here's the Decima Furnace. It doesn't look very big either, but it's a pretty big machine, and this thing fires up to a couple thousand degrees for 18 hours straight, which is what some of these full arch cases take. You don't realize the cooking time that goes into some of these cases if you're not familiar with it. So these are pretty high-powered machines. I think this runs off 220. It's on electrical units, so you may have to do some I should have put some construction pictures up here. I had to redo my whole lab with new, electricals and air plumbing and all that. But it's fine. For a couple $1,000, you can rearrange your lab, move walls, do things, and be in great shape. This is the Ivoclar Vivadent stain and glaze oven. This one here is basically for after it sinters, it goes to stain and glaze. You put the art on it, the color, the shading, glaze it, and throw it in there. Those obviously take like 20 or 30 minutes for the cycle. It's not a big deal, but if you're doing CERAC or already some of your other things, you might already have a staining glaze oven. And then through Articon, obviously, as well, they supply materials for those, whether it be the printing materials. You can kind of see the dies here on the models that come in and out. So there's a lot of neat ways to do printing now where you can still blend old school and new school techniques. We buy our material printer there. I think you can buy pucks through them. You can buy burrs through them. So you can buy darn near everything you need from them. Here's some of the burrs for the machine. Obviously, those aren't the burrs I'm working with. Here's a puck holder for titanium blanks. So you can put, I use the Han implant mostly. So it's got a noble active connection, which would be down here. But then there's the blank part up here. You can mill custom abutments with them. But for other parts and pieces, you're thinking, okay, great, that's wonderful, Phil. You can mill things. But what about, who's putting the parts and pieces for the implants together? And that is something we kind of rely on a separate company, which is mainly focused on implant parts and pieces. And so after I got my shopping list for my inventory for major supplies, we needed to go into kind of what I call like implant supplies, which is all the parts like your lab would have to, if you send them an implant impression, to do the stuff, right? So DES is a company that I've done another podcast with Keith Goldstein there. He's a wealth of knowledge, but he works at DESUSA.com, and they have parts and pieces that go with all these implants, right? So you can imagine anything you need, they would have. You can see here all the connections and interfaces they have there. It's a great place to get anything. So what are we buying from Des, you might wonder? So we're buying analogs in the upper left there. You can see we're buying tie bases. I typically don't buy impression copings from them, but you can. And I'm not sure if you can see my mouse or not. Here's normal transferring impression copings, but we are buying their digital impression copings. That's what this is right here. It's a digital impression coping. And I like theirs because it's metal, so you can sterilize it. It's not shiny metal, it's sandblasted, so it scans well. And they come in all different compatibilities. So I find their intraoral scan to be great. We're buying obviously screws, whether the lab screws or final screws, and then all kinds of abutments, right? You've got straight abutments, angled, temp abutments, healing abutments, multi-units. I mean, you name it. If I need it or the lab needs it, we're pretty much buying it through Des and or direct from the manufacturer, but they are FDA approved. So I'm not going to get into that right now, but you can basically buy anything you want from them as far as parts and pieces for the implants. When it comes to the actual material we're making the teeth out of now, we turned on to this company called Alien Milling. And so that's where we're buying the zirconia pucks, right? If you're not familiar with the machine, these pucks are how the zirconia comes. Like I said, it's still hard, but it's relatively kind of like a compacted dust, right? And you load that into the loader, a little circular thing, and then it kind of cuts out your tooth from there. So these pucks are kind of the raw form of what you start with. And like I was saying, so what I was saying nowadays is, this assortment of pucks, wasn't available 10 years ago, probably even 5 years ago. So you've got Alien HT, which is high translucency. So maybe in the front anterior, you want a high translucency tooth. But then in the back, you might want, something stronger. I don't know what might be, different. There's yttrium strengths, there's megapascals. There's various things, but this high translucency would be good. But they also have a multi-layer, so it might start off at A1 at the gum line and transition down to B1 at the incisal, so that you really have your staining glazing is minimal, right? So there's all kinds of different zirconia pucks out there for different indications, whether it's single, teeth, anterior teeth, full arch. So your lab tech obviously needs to understand a lot about materials, right? So these are various things that they all have different sintering times, they all have different milling times, and different shrinkages when they go through that. So this is a great resource. They have great prices on this. You can see $100, basically $120 on average for a puck. And if you do it right on some of these pucks, you can mill out 20 teeth. So you can restore a whole arch for $120 a puck once you get going. Obviously, that's not your true cost, but once once you get up and running, those could be your costs. So that's where we go to for those. Like I talked about, you need a dedicated separate compressor for the mill. Most offices can kind of have one or two compressors depending on their needs. You might need a separate one dedicated to the mill because it runs specifically off airline. So that might be another investment you have with that, depending on your situation. But any of your local shops can tell you about that. So I bought everything I needed from Articon to get up and running, and everything started except for the cost of the certified dental technician to run it all. My all-in price was about $125,000, and I know people, spend way more than that on a new CEREC, which I think is crazy because with CEREC you can cut like one, it can mill like 1 or 2 units, and it's like, okay, what's the advantage of being in this locked system, cutting one tooth at a time, or buying a whole lab full of lab quality open systems that I can mill anything from wax to PMMA to EMAX to zirconia, and I bought all the scanners. So that includes my printers, my scanners. That includes the mill and more. So I look at this and say, I was spending about $270,000 or $300,000 a year on lab cost. Okay, my all-in price for all the equipment I need to make the same thing plus pay a lab tech was less than that. So I thought that's where I look at the dollars and cents and say, okay, how can I reinvest in what I'm doing, make a better product, make it faster, make it better, make it cheaper, all at the same time. That's what really kind of brought me to pull the trigger on this. So obviously prices may differ depending what you're needing, but I'm just telling you what I did, and not that it's right or wrong, but that's what we went with. So our lab, you can see here, his little workstation here, he's got 2 computers where he does his designing. These are some cases we have been running. Here's the mill right here. You can see the puck loaded in there. You can see what I'm talking about with it when it cuts through the puck. That's a full arch case we were milling there. Just kind of show you some of the stuff we have in the office. So these are all the things that I showed you earlier, but we have them running in the office. So this is the Asiga printer when we first got it. This was the desktop scanner when we had it. This is my little Medit cart that I have that I wheel from operatory to operatory, right? So we scan and print models now. Obviously, you can see alginate or stone models here. Like we haven't gotten rid of alginate. We haven't gotten rid of stone, but we're blending the old school and the new school to come up with the best degree of predictability that we have nowadays, right? Here's the furnace, and here's the stain and glaze area oven next to the stain and glaze area that he has a separate workbench on. So he's doing all of these. If my lab tech, Ryan, wasn't there, I wouldn't know how to do any of it. So if people want to ask me technical questions about this, I can't tell you, but I can give you the 10,000 view. I'm learning more and more as I go, but don't send me a crown and think that I can do it on my own time. But you can see we're still doing models. You can have it printed to articulate. You can also make a separate die available because my lab tech is so old school. He articulates and works through all the motions and does this so that when we get this nice, highly polished glazed zirconia crown here with perfect whatever, they basically drop in. He's doing all the minor adjustments. They don't come out of the machine perfect. There's lots of little tweakings that need to go on, and then staining and glazing, of course. But he's doing all that. I'm just dropping crowns in that look perfect and high-fiving the team. So this is kind of how we do some of our single basic units. Some of our full arch cases you can see here. These are just random pictures I snapped with my phone throughout the weeks and months we've been doing this. You can see we had a try-in, right? So after we went through various phases of healing and temporaries, we did these printed try-ins. So we did a printed try-in on these 6 multi-units. And then here on the right, you can see maybe the final zirconia, right? So at different phases, we're using different materials. We're using different things, right? So we get, maybe these, we're still doing traditional models with full arch, okay? But then we're digitizing it. We're taking this whole model with these multi-unit abutments and putting digital scanners on top of them, throwing it into the desktop scanner, scanning it, and then working with it in ExoCAD. Once it's in ExoCAD, then we can redesign the shape and the teeth and then print them, do as many changes or try-ins as we want, and then when we're done, we take the last approved model and print it and turn it out to this piece of zirconia right here, then which gets stained and glazed and finished and put in the mouth. So here's some single units. You can see here's a just a standard tie base. And when tie bases first came out, they got a bad name. They were actually pretty lousy. Their little pegs on top were like this big, and the teeth break off them. Nowadays, they're actually we've come a long way. So they actually have a nice flair to them. They come out right. They're tall. They bond on well. I haven't had a tooth come off a tie base. I was anti tie base for years and only doing custom abutments, cementables. But nowadays, if the opportunity allows, if I place the implant right, it drops in, we'll do this. If not, we'll still do a custom abutment, cement it in or out of the mouth and go on from there. So there's more than one way to do this. I'm not telling you have to do it any which way. I'm just saying there's lots of ways to do it. I've done them all. You find a system that works for you, and you get good at that and get predictable at that. Obviously, the shading's kind of off here because, like I said, again, I was taking it with my just an iPhone in the office. I take a lot of pictures. I never know if I'll need them or use them, but sometimes you dig back and find them, and so I apologize for that. And Frank, keep me on time. If I'm running over, need to cut it short, let me know. This is obviously it goes through ExoCAD. This is called nesting. You put it in here. Here's the holder. Here's the mill, and then here's the arch. So you can see we designed it. We loaded the puck and we milled it, right? So you leave these little pegs on for strength. You can get pre-center stains. You can do some staining before it goes in. That's to add kind of depth and layering to it. After it goes in the oven and cooks, then you can put pink porcelain on the gums, even more so to fill them out and or add depth on the gums. We buy that from GC America. They have good gum system there, and then we use them for staining glaze too. And then the staining glaze goes in the porcelain there, and so we can come out with a product where I've got these. This was one of the first cases we did all in house. I was trying out some neodent implants. I got 6 neodents on top. And then you can see we did the full arch zirconia for the upper, right? Obviously, you can tell you've got some lower work to be done, but obviously, like most people, he had no teeth in the upper, wearing a denture, wanted to start there. But you can see In my opinion, for this being kind of the first ones we went through, we're able to get great shading and depth with it. I think that's the same puck we just showed you. Now, how to price your services, right? Obviously, we come to this and say, well, Phil, once you get going, if the puck only runs you $100 and you're paying your loan off, you can obviously charge less for these, and sometimes yes, sometimes no. There's still obviously a lot of appointments. I still have to pay the loan back, so it doesn't change the way I do my pricing, but you have to know where your pricing should be to begin with, right? So I think anytime you're giving away a service, it starts with treating people right. Obviously. We're giving them a product and a service. So these are some pictures I'd taken from my website. These are patients I actually did dentistry on, and they actually thought it was halfway decent enough to come back and do the photos. But I use these for marketing, a website, and various other things. But people don't care how much you know until they know what you care, and I think that's a huge deal. So treat people right, but you have to be able to give them a good service. I mean, they're going to pay you a ton of money for this. You have to be able to deliver on that promise that you're giving them, and you're giving them not just a smile, you're giving them hope. So I always think it's important to understand those things before we go. This is just part of something else. So my office, I built a couple years ago. Try to keep it somewhat modern, but still kind of comfortable. I thought maybe if I can have something that's kind of like Crate and Barrel, or not Crate and Barrel, I don't know, one of those home goods stores. But you also need to be organized. So here's our case pans over here. This was my old lab before I blew out the door. Here's our sterilization, all that. So if you think you're sloppy now, bring in a lab and you'll get real sloppy. Another key to success is having mentors, friends, and colleagues. Find a group with AID and take lots of CE. Here's some of us at the Implant Pathway with Moody and Bart and Frank, and here's some other friends that we have there. Implant dentistry is a contact sport, but you have to have fun, right? Here's the president, Dr. Burney. First got introduced to him at the AID maxi course that I took with Dr. Shanker Iyer and John Minichetti. So people that have taught me things along the way. Obviously, there's lots of ways to do immediate conversions nowadays. I don't ever get hung up on what screw you use. I don't care. Get good at your skill. You can use any screw. Here I've got a little scenario with single implants, right? So we talk about how to do pricing. Well, you don't know what to charge until you know how much your stuff costs. My implant fee is $1,800. My custom abutment fees $500, and my implant crown fees $1,200. So I can lower this if I need to do but that's kind of where I start, right? And my patient total is $4,000. I think that's not cheap. It's not high. It might be right in the middle, depending on where you're at and where I'm at. So my office overhead, I kind of put my chair time at just paying my assistant and having something there and stuff that gets turned over. Kind of $310 for the hour that you might schedule. The implant's going to cost me $160 for the Han. Healing abutment's $35. Impression coping's $38. Which now I'm using the reusable one. But I'm just putting it in. Custom abutment can be $299 potentially, and then the crown. So these are all costs if you went through Glidewell, right? So I got these off of their numbers. My cost is $956. So then you can see my profit's just over $3,000. And if you're doing single implants, once you get good at them, you can, your setup and teardown is longer than placing the implant. I mean, if it takes me longer than 5 minutes to place an implant now, my assistants are wondering what's wrong. But it's more so, the quality that we deliver when we're giving this. Obviously when I started, it took me 2 hours to place one implant. Now it takes me 10 minutes. So, it's and the implants I placed in 10 minutes are better than the ones I placed with 2 hours. But obviously you're charging for your time and expertise, but you got to know the numbers, right? So those are my numbers, and this is just going through a conventional system, right? So I'm not adding into any of the cut costs that I might have nowadays. My 4 implant overdenture is $14,900. I know it's kind of high for an overdenture case, but I only place 4 implants on overdentures. I don't do 2. I don't like them rocking, teeter-tottering, so I only offer 4 so that patients will be happy. My overhead on some surgical and restorative time, I've got 4 implants, 4 healing abutments, impression copings, which are really zest locators, and on my total cost is maybe $3,000. So my profit on those are kind of nice, but once again, I'm using a high-end lab. I'm giving them great results, and I'm giving them stability that they didn't have before. So it's really about what value you're bringing in their life. Full arch zirconia bridges, I only do 6. I don't offer anything less than that. I always place 6, unless anatomically restricted. And even then I try to get sick. So I have my implant fee, my Brexer fee. My total fee is $24,900. I think that's maybe average for my area. But then you've got overhead. This should probably be higher because there's a lot of appointments in these implants, healing abutments, suppression copings, multi-units, full arch zirconia, $3,500 for an average. Your cost at a minimum is going to be $6,000 to $7,000 per arch. That's if you're doing it freehand, and really keep an eye on the cost. So my profit zone can be high on these, but this number goes down drastically the more the appointments and time go up. So you have to keep that in mind as well. At first, I was probably losing money on these cases, and I'm finally just getting to the point where I'm making money on these cases from a time standpoint. When it comes to cost, you also have to look at cost for the patient, right? So I've only had one person walk in and write me a check for these full arch cases. So most people do financing, right? A financing company that I use for the most time is Proceed Finance, right? So I do Proceed Finance a lot. I was doing I don't even know the one everyone used, Care Credit, but obviously they don't go up enough or long enough terms for some of these cases. So I basically have a $5,000 loan, a $14,000, and breaking down for my full arch fee, so that I know that if patients walking with this credit score and they want this much, they break it over this month, it's going to be these payments. So have that spelled out for the patient and have those options available. That's how you get patients to move forward. And then I bundle my cases. People talk about fees or this and that. What do you charge for that? For the bigger arch case things, I try to bundle it and I say I'm going to take you from start to finish for this fee. And it simplifies the process, right? For me, it was about trying something new. It was about that leap of faith, stepping out on an edge, and not knowing if it would work. And two questions that you might be thinking about, will this work, and is this what I'm supposed to do? I don't think we ever know the answer to those things before we start. But if you're not willing to go out on a limb and take some chances, sometimes you're not going to know what's on the other side of that door. So I think they're calculated risks, but they're still risks, right? And so here was a case I did. She had some bad teeth. I actually did some socket shields on these, did immediate temps. You can see just cylinders, but you can see these are zirconia screw-down crowns on custom abutments. And so those are the finals. The day I took off the temps, put in the finals. So you can get, we could have got a brighter shade there, but that's what she wanted, and that's where she was at. She didn't want to change. And so these are just simple cases that may or may not walk in your office. So we had missing teeth here. Took out teeth. I did this one guided, and I'll just show you a couple because I just want to show you some of the results of zirconia, right? It can look good. It's not what it used to be. I'm not trying to show off any surgery here. I'm just trying to show some of the teeth, right? These are good teeth that are going to work for this person. I ended up doing them singles because she wanted to floss. But you can see, those are full zirconia. And even this guy wanted it a little brighter, because he said he's going to bleach up. I don't know if he will or not, but it's still a nice looking A1 shade here. Now, here's some of the ones that you're really transform people's lives. See, it's still basic surgery. It's still fundamentals. I'm still taking regular impressions. But what I want to highlight is this is zirconia, guys, and this isn't something we could do 10 years ago. This was zirconia that we made and we put in, and I think that's the big changer is the material alone. I got one more case here at the end that I really want to show just how materials can change people's lives. This was a gal that came into me, and she needed help, right? But she had limitations, and these kind of cases are out there, and obviously surgically they get complicated. But if you can figure out a way to get screws in the bone and find out where to put teeth in space, we're still going through basic surgery here. We're still doing converted dentures, but where I'm ending up at is a material now that has the strength and the beauty to do what we want it to in dentistry nowadays. And I think that's what patients are expecting. It used to be patients with bad teeth just wanted dentures. Well, and then time went on. And then patients with dentures just wanted dentures that were fixed in their mouth. Okay, and then time went on. And now patients want teeth that are fixed in their mouth that look and feel just as good as their natural teeth or better. So the expectation on the patient is keep on rising, right? So that's what kind of pushes me and challenges me to keep raising expectations as well. It's like, okay, dentures aren't good enough anymore. For some people, over dentures aren't good enough anymore. For some people, converted dentures wrapped around acrylic isn't good enough anymore. So we have to keep figuring out where does the technology, the material, and my skill set interweave to a point where I can utilize various technologies and materials to deliver the strength, beauty, and function that we're trying to do with implant dentistry. And so I think we're finally at that point now. These are life-changing things for our patients. And so these are how we're doing them in our office. I've made a lot of silly mistakes in dentistry, and so I always put this up here: with good judgment comes experience, and experience comes from poor judgment. Nobody goes from start to finish and masters these things, but it is a process, like I said, and I think these are starting points that you can look at for the process. And here's my contact information. If anybody ever wants to reach out to me, I am always available via text, email, or Facebook. If I don't get back to you right away, I definitely will. If I'm not busy changing diapers on the kids or working in the practice, I'm always available. So I appreciate your time today. If you guys have any questions, I can answer those quickly, and we'll keep on track here.
Wow. Thank you so much for the breakdown in the cost. That was what I was writing down questions for you. And one of them was, how much did it end up costing you to kind of set it all up? And it sounds like $125,000. And then I was like, damn, that's a lot. And then you compared it to the CEREC.
Yeah, but is it really? I mean,
we bought two CERECs, 2 milling units.
Yeah,
and
this is really a lot. Question.
Two, speed fires, and I was like, oh,
yeah, it's so. When you hear it, it's like,
Ryan's a hell of a guy.
Yeah. Now I pay him well. Most lab technicians, though, I think, are kind of working in tough. I mean, I kind of equate them like working in a coal mine half the time. They're really having to crank things out, and they're really being pushed, and they're not getting to see the patients. And I think if people worry about working, I find a technician. I think either try to find one you have a relationship with and ask around, or talk to some smaller labs, and or put out ads. I think that can be the hardest part, is finding a good technician. But I know there's a lot of good technicians working for these labs that would love the hours that we work, the pay that we can offer them, and the patient interaction. So I think if you really want to go down this road, you can find it. Obviously, you can contact me, but just talk to people. Find resources. They're out there. And once again, Frank, thanks so much. And if you have any other questions, I can answer those.
Well, Dr. Minichetti said he's going to move to Kansas now. So there goes your patient load.
Well, there you go. That's okay. I'll just turn into a new lab tech.